Radio.
They will thrust a cell phone in your face if you ask a question. They'll surround you with cameras. They'll scream at you. They'll try to get you to commit violence. I believe God is giving us a little bit of a glimpse into what life without Him would be like.
A Disciple's View with Todd Herman. Critical information from a faith-enriching perspective. Weekdays at noon Central on AFR.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Talks between the U.S. and Iran have stalled as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Madeline Rivera has more.
President Trump hasn't been satisfied with the state of negotiations in Iran to the point that he pulled out of those second round of expected talks between U.S. and Iranian officials in Pakistan over the weekend. He says Iran has come a long way, but indicates they have not gone far enough. Now, Axios reports CENTCOM has prepared a plan for a short and powerful wave of strikes on Iran, likely including infrastructure targets, in hopes of breaking the negotiating deadlock. But when asked Wednesday if he's considering more strikes, the president did not commit, at least publicly.
Yesterday, Florida's House and Senate voting to approve a new congressional map that could give Republicans 4 more seats in Congress. And the Supreme Court striking down Louisiana's congressional map because it was based on race to help Democrats get more black votes. Florida Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins says Florida's congressional map is a true representation of his state.
100%. Look, this is not our first rodeo. This happens every time we do something that's strong and conservative, and yet we've continued to push forward. They very well, this could be an issue at first, and we know we'll win on appeal, or we know we'll win outright because we've done the math. Look, we have almost a 1.5 million person voter advantage in terms of Republicans. The shift in population in our state has been significant. This is an accurate depiction of what goes on the ground in Florida. Again, geography plus population equals reality.
China is looking to dominate American technology, the latest example being new accusations that they have stolen intellectual property from artificial intelligence labs. But that's not stopping Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders from sitting alongside Chinese scientists and calling on the U.S. to slow down its AI advancements.
What I believe and what I suspect that most people in the United States, China, and around the world believe is that we need international cooperation between the nations of the world to prevent the possibility of a cataclysmic development.
Fox technology contributor Kurt Knudsen says this is like letting the fox watch the hen house.
It makes zero sense. One of the dumbest ideas Senator Bernie Sanders has had yet. The idea that you're going to bring our AI technology onto the footstep of a Chinese representative here on U.S. soil is ridiculous. Talk about a risk to AI. This is a risk to our growth in this country. This is a war between our adversaries, China, and when it comes to AI innovation. Bringing them right here for these discussions is absurd.
And finally, social credit. The dystopian Chinese communist system of tracking every move its citizens make is meeting up with capitalism at your local grocery store. Steve Jordahl reports on surveillance pricing.
Would you be surprised to find out the price you're paying for a hamburger at your local grocery store is 10% more than your neighbor is paying when he's standing in line right behind you? Surveillance pricing uses AI to analyze reams of data, including facial recognition, your estimated income, your shopping history, and more, to determine what is the absolute most you will pay for any given item. Talk host Richard Randall says Maryland is so concerned about it, state lawmakers are working on a ban.
A shout out to Maryland because they're ahead of the curve on this when it comes to consumers. Here in Colorado, I'm looking forward to our legislature enacting something along these lines because it's a horrible set.
He says one way to tell if your grocery store is using surveillance pricing is if they have digital price tags on the shelves. Those will change depending on who's standing in front of the item.
And they know that person's willing to pay 5% more, 10% more, because the item means a lot more to them and in high demand.
Randall says Maryland's law is fairly simple.
What it says is you can't change your prices. You have to leave a price up for at least a day.
Fox News reports a shopper at a Kroger in Oregon used a state privacy law to find out how much data was being collected on her.
When you have a consumer says, okay, I'm going to file some sort of a claim and I'd like to see exactly what you have on me, and you get back a printout that has more than 60 pages, and much of it is not accurate,
I'm Steve Jordahl.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, April 30th. We are finally at the end of April. Can you believe it? It seemed like this month has been really long, at least to me. But good news. This morning, the Supreme Court rules against Democrats trying to unmask crisis pregnancy center donors. This coming from Daily Caller. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled in favor of religious pregnancy centers Wednesday and decided that courts can rule against subpoenas targeting donors even if those subpoenas are not enforced. And I have to say, when it's unanimous and you actually get Justice Jackson to agree with the correct side, this is how bad the Democrats targeting pregnancy centers really were when this is unanimous and there wasn't that one lone, DEI hire crazy dissent. So this is how bad New Jersey was in targeting this. So former Democrat New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin issued a subpoena against First Choice Women's Resources Centers Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that has offered resources to pregnant women in the state since 1985. In 2022, and most of our listeners will remember this story, Platkin issued a consumer alert accusing the pregnancy center, among other organizations, of trying to prevent women from receiving quote-unquote reproductive health care by providing false or misleading abortion information. First Choice, of course, believes that life begins at conception and does not provide abortions or refer clients to other groups for abortions. And so Platkin allegedly served a subpoena to the Crisis Pregnancy Center, demanding that it produce 28 different types of documents, including the personal information of donors who contributed by any means other than through one specific web page, adding that failure to comply could result in penalties, including contempt of court. So this was basically just bullying, and thankfully, the Supreme Court has struck this down. But it's really frustrating that for the New Jersey Attorney General, other than losing this case, there really isn't consequences for using the state resources to unlawfully come after these crisis pregnancy centers. And that's why the Democrats just keep perpetuating lawfare, because they'll throw anything against the wall and see what sticks. And if we didn't have the majority, and thankfully the unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court in this case, they might have gotten away with it. And so let's welcome in Father Frank Pavone, who's founder of Priests for Life. And Frank, this is overall a really good decision, though.
It's an excellent decision. And, Jenna, we were confident about it from the beginning. And, of course, especially after the oral arguments. But, just looking at it on its face, it's clear violation of the rights to assembly and free association, First Amendment rights. But this, our listeners need to understand, is part of a pattern, a long pattern. The pregnancy centers have been under direct attack by the abortion industry for decades, of legal attack. We see in the U.S. Senate, for example, Senator Pocahontas,
Elizabeth Warren.
She introduced legislation numerous times, let's designate these as fake clinics, because they're not practicing medicine. Meanwhile, most of the pregnancy centers now are medical clinics. They're actual medical clinics with doctors, staffing them, et cetera, et cetera. But the other side doesn't care because, and the motive for their attacks, whether legally or, as we saw after Dobbs, especially physically, is that every time a pregnancy center saves a life, the abortion industry loses business. They lose money. And that's how we have to understand this, aside from their demonic worldview that somehow killing babies is something good. And these Democrat governors are terrible. I mean, we see what's happening in New Jersey with the Democrat administration. But look at Pennsylvania, too. Josh Shapiro, when he came in, he ended a decades-long arrangement, beautiful arrangement, by which the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was letting public monies help moms find alternatives to abortion. And this was a very caring, compassionate approach. The Republicans put, furthermore, into their, what the Democrats complain about as abortion bans, like in Florida and Texas, for example, when you look at the strict abortion laws there. These laws contain, and the Democrats never talk about this, substantial funding for pregnancy centers. So let's put this in perspective. If people think that the Democrats are just, they're pro-choice because they believe in choice and women's health care and they just want people to have options, think again. Learn from what went on in New Jersey, from what went on in Pennsylvania, from what people like Elizabeth Warren are doing. Learn that they are outright attacking the efforts of Americans to provide alternatives to women who maybe don't really want abortion but feel they have no other choice. How is that acceptable? And how does that, the American people don't go along with that. Plenty of people that are pro-choice. They'll say, I'm very much in favor of the pregnancy centers and helping women have a choice. So, overall, very good decision.
Yeah, and if this had been allowed to stand, it would have had a chilling effect on the freedom of association and these donors who didn't want to be unmasked, because then that they'll be targeted by leftist groups. They might even be put on, a hate watch list or, some other kind of targeting just to discourage them from donating. And this is where the left always is trying purposefully to demonetize conservatives. And that was really, I think, the emphasis in this case. And this is why the Supreme Court opinion was really good, because, we want to make sure that not only do people have the constitutionally protected right to freedom of association, but that they're not targeted for exercising their political or religious beliefs, and especially not for just donating to a pregnancy center.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's a pregnancy center conference coming up just next week. I'll be speaking at it. It's called the NIFLA, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates. And I was just at the Heartbeat Conference a few weeks ago. Thousands of people that run these pregnancy centers across the country and around the world, actually, coming together. And boy, there's going to be some celebrating next week. And, NIFLA won a big case at the Supreme Court a handful of years ago about another kind of attack on the centers, which, again, the Supreme Court backed the pregnancy centers, where they were being required by certain states to actually advertise for abortion. Here you have a center established specifically to lead people away from abortion. And these states were saying, but you have to post a notice as to where they can get an abortion. That's like Alcoholics Anonymous being required to tell people where the nearest liquor store is. It's so ridiculous. But the other side doesn't care. They are on a rampage, and they are obsessed with abortion. The Democrat Party is obsessed with abortion, and voters need to ask themselves, do I really want to be part of a party that takes that approach?
Absolutely. And Congressman Brandon Gill has been one of the best advocates in Congress for pro-life. And during a recent hearing, speaking of the Democrats being absolutely obsessed with abortion, they're obsessed with it, but they won't actually admit to what the procedures actually are, because they know that there is no abortion procedure that is not utterly horrific. And I'm not going to play the clip just because Congressman Gill goes into specific detail, and listeners can go and find that clip on his X page. I reposted it. It's all over. But I don't want to play it just because it goes into detail about how gruesome these procedures are. But the question that was so smart was that he was asking an abortion advocate what her favorite method of abortion is. And she refused to respond. Now, if you ask any doctor, if you ask any surgeon, what's your preferred method of, say, stitches, or say, this type of surgery, or what's your favorite way to deal with, this type of heart defect, or what? I mean, I know a few doctors, and they love talking about their procedures. They'll explain to you in detail why this method might be preferred in this instance versus that one. Like, they're so technical and detailed, and yet it's so revealing that this abortion advocate refused to talk about the different methods of abortion. And then Brandon Gill goes into and he says, okay, well, how about this one? And he describes it in detail. Is that your favorite? And she just says, I rest on my former answer. Yeah. And he goes through all of these because they are so utterly heinous. And it just shows that Democrats want the outcomes of abortion, but even they know, because they're still human beings made in the image of God. They have, though they are suppressing the truth in their wickedness, they still know that these procedures are that evil and disgusting.
Yeah, they definitely know. I Brandon Gill has been a friend. I endorsed him when he first decided to run, and he's been a rising star. And what the approach he took is exactly what I've been advocating for decades. Look, the Democrats never describe what they defend, and if all of us simply use that challenge to them, I say, hey, listen, I'm not even going to argue with you if abortion is right or wrong, if it should be legal or illegal. Let's start with this. Tell me what an abortion is. Or you could ask them, have you ever seen one? And we have a special website, Jenna, we've talked about it before, lookatabortion.org, lookatabortion.org. And listen, people, you don't have to, if people want to say, oh, I don't want you quoting the Bible to me, I don't want you giving me pro-life literature, biased information, fine. Go to the abortionists. Mm-hmm. Go to the medical textbooks. Now, like you said, the propagandists, they'll never describe the procedure or even admit what it is. But the abortionists themselves have to. As a matter of fact, at the Supreme Court, there have been cases about preferred methods of abortion. When you go back to the whole partial birth abortion debate, one of the arguments they made against banning a particular type of procedure is that, sometimes this procedure is more safe than other types. So they'll talk about the procedures in the medical textbooks. So we're not making this up. Brandon Gill isn't making it up. But they won't describe what they defend. And, I'm often quoted as saying, America will not reject abortion until America sees abortion. Now, let me, if I might, contrast this with the approach to the death penalty. If you look at, I'm thinking of two episodes, one from the series The West Wing and the other one from Grey's Anatomy. So one is a political program. The other one is a medical program. And in both of those series, at one point, there are episodes about the death penalty. Okay, you know what they do in those episodes? They describe and even show in detail how someone is executed by the death penalty. I mean, they describe the medications. They show them being strapped on the table. So you show the drugs going in within the injection site. They describe it in detail. And in the West Wing episode, the president even ends up going to confession to his priest because he didn't intervene to stop the execution. So left-wing narrative, right? Meanwhile, of course, both series have episodes where the abortion issue comes up. Never is there once a description, even though on Grey's Anatomy, you see heart and lung and kidney transplants. You see the blood. You see the cutting. You see it. Except you never see one of the most common surgeries in America, which is abortion. I mean, this is so transparent. This is so obvious. And it's such a powerful strategy for our listeners to use. Challenge people, again, who defend abortion. Describe what you defend. Have you ever seen one? Until you see one, don't think you even have an informed opinion about it.
Yeah, so well said. And, you've been on this program for years, and you have been an advocate, even as long as I've known you, for that exact position, which is asking the advocates of abortion to actually describe what they're advocating for. Because you're right, in Hollywood, in entertainment, in the testimony before Congress, they use all of these euphemisms. They, you just see on things like Grey's Anatomy, you just see the woman asking for the procedure. Maybe you see her, taking a pill, but you never actually see the outcome, you don't see the procedure itself, when that's literally the point of the show Grey's Anatomy, is to show complex surgeries, to show all of the medicine, but that's the one procedure that they won't show. Why? Because it is so gruesome, and because the definition of abortion is a medical intervention specifically designed to cause the death of a child. And in every other instance of surgery and medicine, they're always trying to save lives, not take them. And when you ask these questions, it just reveals the truth. Yeah.
And you remember, Jenna, a few years ago, there was a young woman on social media. She said, "I'm going to film my abortion to show people it's really no big deal." Well, I challenged her. I said, "You didn't film your abortion. I'll take you at your word that during the video you were having an abortion." But she filmed her face. She didn't film the abortion, but she said, "Oh, look, I'm having the abortion now," and all big propaganda thing. But I said, "Look, you really want to film your abortion? Let that camera show the instrument that's going inside you and the little body with a beating heart that it's tearing apart. Then you're showing your abortion."
So well said. Well, we have to take a break here, but let's take a lesson from Frank Pavone and also Congressman Gill, and not just allow the left to keep using these euphemisms, but ask them, what is an abortion? Just like that very famous question from Matt Walsh, what is a woman? Well, you have to define the thing that you're talking about. You can't just use these euphemisms or these word plays or these fake definitions. And you'll see that the abortion advocates do not want to talk about that, because they know that anyone who actually understands what an abortion is would never, ever advocate for it as, period, but especially they would not advocate for it as quote unquote healthcare. We'll be right back with more.
Hey, it's Michael Woolworth with Bible League International. Well, we just celebrated Easter only weeks ago, right? How many of us have drawn comfort and strength from the resurrection story in John 20, where the two Marys go to the tomb, right? And they hear that Jesus is not there. He's risen just as he said. The Christians we're talking about now have never read a single verse in their own Bibles. People like Yusuf, a cobbler in Pakistan, praying for his very own Bible after being shunned by his Muslim family when he became a believer. Also, Rosalia, a former witch doctor in Paraguay in South America. She's a new believer praying for a Bible. Again, this is the spring season, and we want to bless 4,000 Bibleless believers around the world by the end of April. We're a little short of that goal, so please, at $5 a Bible, $100 since $20, $500 will put Bibles into the empty waiting hands of 100 waiting believers. Would you call 800-YES-WORD? 800-YES-WORD. That's 800-YES-WORD. Or give at sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
Okay, here's an assignment for you, if you will. I want you to take some time and think about a getaway that gives you a chance to get together with other people of faith, deepen your walk with God, and make new friends, all while enjoying the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. I'm talking about joining AFA at the Ark, October 29th and 30th. This is a great opportunity to break away from the grind of everyday life and draw closer to God through special presentations from Patricia Engler and Brian Osborne of Answers in Genesis. It also includes entrance to the Creation Museum on Thursday and the Ark Encounter on Friday. Friday's dinner includes a panel discussion with Tony Vitagliano, Walker Wildman, and Wesley Wildman, Vice Presidents of American Family Association. This is an event that can fill up quickly, so hurry to afa.net/events to register for AFA at the Ark 2026. afa.net/events, and we'll see you at the Ark.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starn. Stand by for news and commentary next. Christian leaders say Chick-fil-A has waffled on same-sex marriage. More than a decade ago, Christians around the nation rallied to defend the fast food restaurant after gay marriage activists declared war. They tried to put Chick-fil-A out of business after the son of founder Truett Cathy said marriage is between one man and one woman. But it appears there's been a cultural shift at Chick-fil-A, a Utah franchise posting photos on its Facebook page celebrating the marriage of two men. In recent years, Chick-fil-A stopped donating to Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes after pressure from gay rights groups. Governor Mike Huckabee said his decision to lead that nationwide campaign to support Chick-fil-A was his biggest regret. And many loyal customers are wondering if Chick-fil-A's values were simply a marketing ploy to endear themselves to Christians. Regardless, traditional values have been taken off the menu at Chick-fil-A, just like the chicken salad sandwich and the coleslaw. I'm Todd Stearns.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, another big Supreme Court decision yesterday. The Supreme Court rules on Voting Rights Act striking down Louisiana map. This coming from The Hill. The Supreme Court declared Louisiana's addition of a second majority black congressional district an unconstitutional racial gerrymander on Wednesday, a 6-3 decision along ideological lines that weakens a central provision of the Voting Rights Act. And of course, that's the spin from The Hill, that it weakens a central provision. This is actually a very good decision. And unlike the Crisis Pregnancy Center decision that was unanimous, this was 6-3. And of course, you can guess probably who the three dissenting liberal justices are. Louisiana's legal saga thrust the state into the center of conservatives' push to curtail Section 2 of the voting law, which, according to The Hill, and this is the Democrats' view, has long enabled advocacy groups to force new majority-minority districts. So it's a good thing that the Supreme Court is striking this down, and that the districts can't be racially gerrymandered. So let's welcome in Mike Donnelly. He is an attorney, and you can follow him on X at Donnelly Speaks for all of his snarky commentary that I obviously prefer. So, Mike, good morning. And I loved that Hakeem Jeffries posted yesterday. Wow, we no longer have DEI, we no longer have racial gerrymandering, we no longer have affirmative action, and was going on along this list, and I'm going, great, we're finally getting back to the golden age of America.
Well, what we're getting back to, Jenna, and good morning to you and everyone listening. It's great to be with you, of course, and this is a very important and appropriate and correct decision. Of course, anything that Justice Alito writes, you can bet most of the time is going to be 100% right on, spot on. And he was in this one, too. It's an excellent decision. Look, the Constitution is colorblind. Our country should be colorblind. Do we have racial issues from the past? You better believe it. We can't hide from that. We shouldn't hide from it, which is why we shouldn't tear down statues and try to erase our history. We need to remember it so we don't repeat it. But we fixed it. And we've been fixing it for a long time. And the 14th and 15th Amendments do not allow government to sort Americans by race. And the court, an earlier court, a different court, and under different conditions, let's just be real, right? Under different conditions, allowed this Voting Rights Act, which was passed, under the authority of the Constitution, 15th Amendment, allowing Congress to deal with this issue of race in the context of voting. The 15th Amendment says this. It says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And that's what the Voting Rights Act was intended to do, was to prevent states, and the southern states mostly, from, not allowing blacks to have a voice, right? And so we've come a long way from the 1960s. And what Justice Alito did in this case, instead of striking it down, which I agree it shouldn't have been struck down, he said, look, this is a very straightforward statutory interpretation case. And what we're going to do is correctly interpret the Voting Rights Act in Section 2 and not assume that everything the southern states do is motivated by racism, okay, which is what the court had essentially done in the 70s and 80s. And Alito says, look, now plaintiffs can come and challenge maps, but what they have to do is they have to prove that it was intentionally done to disenfranchise people on the basis of race. And so what this case stands for is what Students for Fair Admissions stood for, okay? We are not going to allow the government to use race as a basis for anything other than very strict, very narrow things, and there are only two of those. We can talk about them if you want. But what Justice Roberts said in Students for Fair Admissions was eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. You don't do it in university admissions, and we're not going to do it in the voting booth either. That's what this case is about.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, and yet the Democrats are trying to confuse and conflate this issue, especially in light of the current legitimate redistricting that's going on in Florida and also Texas. And then, of course, you have the response to that from the Democrats in Virginia that recently got struck down because that suggested that Virginia is a 10-to-1 Democrat voting electorate state, which is just absurd. And so where is the line, and how should people understand the difference between illegal racial gerrymandering and legitimate redistricting that actually considers the electorate and the population?
That's a great question. And that's what's going on, right? And look, gerrymandering is, they use that word and they say, oh, this is terrible. And of course, the Democrats say it's terrible when the Republicans do it, but they love it when they do it, right? And they've been doing it for decades. That's why California is the way it is. That's why, Massachusetts has no Republican representatives. That's why Maryland is, 8-to-1. Illinois, just go down the list. The Democrats have been doing this for decades and the Republicans haven't. It's not unconstitutional. It's not wrong for the party in power in the state legislature to draft maps that may give them a partisan advantage. The Supreme Court has said this is a non-justiciable issue. It's political. The Constitution gives it to the states, doesn't give the federal government any authority to go in and police that. But what the Constitution does do is prohibit the state doing anything based on race. And that there's a presumption in there which I find offensive. And, the court calls it odious when you use race as a governmental factor to draw these kinds of lines. That assumes that all blacks or all Hispanics vote the same way. And that's really offensive because there are lots of black conservatives, there are lots of Hispanic conservatives who are Republicans who want to have their votes counted. And when you force racial factors onto that, you're disenfranchising those voters, right? And so what this court case does is it says, look, we understand that this used to be done because of racism back in maybe 50s, 60s or whatever, and that's not what's happening now. But if you can prove that it is happening, you can still challenge maps. So this doesn't say that people can't challenge maps based on racism. What it simply says is you've got to just give evidence of that, and it can't be just partisan because partisan gerrymandering is not wrong. That's what the court says.
Mm-hmm. And which is interesting because critics are saying that it allows partisan gerrymandering, but supporters say it prevents racial sorting. And what you're saying is that it does both because partisan gerrymandering is okay and racial sorting isn't. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if we don't like partisan gerrymandering, then we need to, look, that's majority rule. Okay, we are a majority rule country. We have a constitution that protects rights to a lot of them. Okay. But we are still the majority rule country, and the states have the authority to decide how they're going to do maps. Some of them do it. Some of them have independent commissions. Some of them have dealt with this issue of partisan versus nonpartisan, and that's something that the state can do. But this is about the federal government intervening and using the federal constitution to override state action. Let's not forget that. That's what the Voting Rights Act is all about, and it's been used in a variety of ways by the Democrats to impose, Democrat majority minority districts, assuming that all blacks vote the same way. And that's fundamentally inconsistent with the way the Constitution works. It's odious.
Yeah, and that actually gets me to the next question, which is, this is a good decision, but it is federal government intervention. And so how much should the unelected federal judges be involved in second-guessing state legislatures on district maps? And, I would guess the answer to that is very little unless it's something that is so obviously unconstitutional that the court would need to step in.
That's exactly right. That's what this case does, is it reestablishes that balance between the federal government and the states in the context of voting and in the 15th Amendment, saying that you can't discriminate on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude in voting. What the Democrats are saying, Obama says that this effectively guts a key pillar of the Voting Rights Act. That's what he said yesterday. Kamala Harris said this is designed to give an upper hand to Donald Trump's Republican Party. That's all you need to know. This is about politics. The Dems are mad because the country's changing and it's more conservative. We know that the split in Congress shouldn't be this close because more people are leaning Republican than Democrat, and they're mad because this is going to realize that.
And that's what's happening.
It's going to hurt them politically.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening in Florida and Texas, is that the maps, because there have been so many people that have moved to red states, especially since 2020. I mean, Florida now has over 1 million more registered Republicans than we did in 2020, which was even before I moved here. I mean, I'm one of them, right, who moved because of DeSantis's leadership from a blue state, right? And so, of course, the maps should be redrawn. It should accurately and appropriately reflect the electorate. But even kind of putting the districting aside, if we are considering the fact that there are that many more Republicans, unless you try to specifically carve out, a district that is only covering where Democrats reside, which is what the Democrats try to do, overall, shouldn't it be that the population of states like Florida and Texas now yield just more Republican seats in Congress by virtue of the voting electorate? Or are we assuming that registration also equals turnout?
I mean, that's fair. It should reflect more Republican House seats because that's what is happening, and so it's appropriate for redistricting to happen. I just want to point out something about this case. If you look at the district in Louisiana that was challenged, it looks like a snake. It cuts through 4 cities. It goes 250 miles. Okay, and it's like a snake snaking through the whole state of Louisiana just to capture black neighborhoods, assuming that all black people want to vote the same way. I mean, people in Shreveport versus people in, Baton Rouge, they may or may not vote the same way, but it's wrong to assume that just because they're black, they're going to vote the same way and that you've got to force them all into one congressional district. That's what's wrong with this, and that's why what the court did is correct.
And so, that also raises a really interesting question, though. Why don't we go to districts just being basically grids? I mean, why even allow for partisan gerrymandering? I mean, I get the point of, those in power and, being able to be a majority-led country, all of those things. But if then the districting goes kind of back and forth depending on who's in power in the state legislature, why not just draw a grid and whoever happens to live in the district lives in the district and, that's the way the cookie crumbles?
I mean, that certainly would be one way the state legislatures could do it, but
And I think we might have lost Mike Donnelly. We'll try to get him. Oh, and he's back. Sorry, we lost you on that one. If you could repeat your answer, apologies. You cut out for a minute. And I think he might be gone again. We'll try to get a better connection to Mike Donnelly. We're almost at the end of the segment anyway, but let's try to get him back just to finish, that question. And it's really, to me, this falls along the rationale constitutionally of state authority. And if we actually look at how much power is given to the states instead of the federal government, the state legislatures should be so much more powerful and so much more attention paid to them than, all of the news that's on the federal government and how we're looking to Congress to solve all of the problems. Well, constitutionally, it should be the state legislatures that are in control of their own states. And yes, that has national implications. But as we've learned from, even federal elections, states constitutionally have the ability and the power to run their elections as they see fit. Congress can only set the time, place, and manner for federal elections. And I'm told we have Mike Donnelly back. So if you could repeat your answer in terms of, why not just have like the grid and say, okay, we're just fixing the map. It's going to stay the same way unless, we literally change state lines. And then nobody would be arguing over these things other than, maybe trying to convince people to move to different districts. I mean, I'm sure Democrats would come up with some other potential solution to try to game the system. But, why haven't we thought about some kind of solution like that?
Well, Jen, I think you were giving the answer while I was getting back online. This is federalism. This is the kind of government we have. We have a majority rule country where state legislatures are empowered to make those decisions. And some have made decisions to have independent commissions to draw maps, and some have decided to retain that power themselves. If we, the people in the states, want to make changes, we can do that through our elected representatives. And, we've talked about this many times. We don't need the federal government, Big Daddy, telling us all what to do. And this was just another situation where the courts, which have even less credibility and appropriate authority in telling the states what to do, telling states how to draw their state and congressional representative maps. And that was wrong, in my opinion. So, if states want to do things with grids, they can do it. If they don't, they don't. That's simple.
Yeah. And this is where I hope that the redistricting in Florida goes through and, also Texas. But then, in that same vein of federalism, we now have the state Supreme Court that has struck down the redistricting in Virginia. But that went through a citizens ballot initiative or proposal, which, is a little bit different way and it circumvents the legislature. But what's your view, at least in terms of the conversation of federalism? Because a lot of people after that went through were suggesting, well, if the courts intervene at this point, it'll look like it's, overturning the will of the people, and that whole argument.
Well, on Virginia, now, did the Virginia Supreme Court overturn it, or did they? I didn't hear
They refused to certify it currently. So
Okay,
that's where it's at right now. So it's not fully decided. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to be clear because my understanding was that the lower court in Virginia had put a hold on certifying the results, and the Virginia Supreme Court agreed to keep that hold in place as they're considering it. So I think, when you've got the state's Supreme Courts interpreting their own constitution, that's appropriate. And I've been following this because I live right next door to Virginia in West Virginia, and I work in the District of Columbia, so this is a hot issue. And, what the people who proposed and went through the initiative process did is they broke the rules. There are a couple of very obvious instances in which they didn't follow the constitutional process to put the ballot initiative on the election for the election, and the Virginia Supreme Court is being asked to enforce those rules after the fact. They declined to stop the ballot initiative from going forward for a variety of reasons, and I think that was fine. I think they could have stopped it, but they said, well, we're just going to let it go through because if in the end it gets voted down, it's a moot point. Now that it was barely passed by a couple thousands of votes, they're now going to take it up and make a decision. And it seems pretty obvious to me that the people who tried to put that ballot initiative through broke the rules. And the Virginia Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision on that. It seems like it ought to strike it down.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense. And I think that there's, a difference where, well, again, the Democrats are trying to conflate this by saying, well, if you agree with federalism and you agree with, the will of the people, then, you can't be for Florida and Texas while you're against Virginia. But, those are two very different situations, and you have to look at the particulars. I mean, it's just like I was watching on a clip from, I think it was MSNBC, of the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, responding to the indictment of James Comey. And, Major Garrett, the journalist, is trying to catch him and say, well, what about this? This looks exactly the same. Are you going to go after these people? And Blanche had such the perfect answer where he said, this is all part of an investigation. Just because two things on face may look similar to you, that doesn't mean that they're legally situated in the posture exactly the same, so that the outcome is the same. And I think that what's missing here oftentimes, Mike Donnelly, is a lack of nuance and a lack of like in-depth conversation about the law, about federalism, about districting, all of these things. And so the bottom line, and we've got to take a break here, but the bottom line for listeners is don't get caught up in how the mainstream media and especially the Democrats like to conflate these issues. You have to look at them independently, what law actually is applicable, what's being argued, what's being challenged, and not just say, well, if I'm for Florida and Texas, then isn't it hypocritical of me to be against Virginia? Well, no, and this is why I love having the more long format conversations on radio, because we can get into those details. So thanks so much, Mike Donnelly. Again, follow him on X at Donnelly Speaks, and we will be right back with more.
Life can be hard, but we have to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. I'm Christy Graham, host of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, and I want to encourage you in your walk with God. Listen each week as we go behind the scenes of our work around the world. You'll be challenged and encouraged in your own faith as you hear how God is actively changing lives. Join us for On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, Sundays at 8:30 a.m. Central, right here on American Family Radio.
I'm Tim Moore from Christ in Prophecy Radio. With all the uncertainty in the world, it's good to know God's promises never change. That's why each week we examine current events through the reliable lens of Bible prophecy. To hear hope for the future, join me for Christ in Prophecy, Saturdays at 1 p.m. and Sundays at 11 a.m. Central. Find out what's really going on. Saturdays at 1 p.m. and Sundays at 11 a.m. Central, here on American Family Radio.
I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Have you ever seen one of those track and field events where the runner starts out in blazing fashion, leading the pack for the majority of the race, only to stumble just before reaching the finish line? Starting the race well and running well are vitally important, but if we don't finish the race well, all else can be overthrown. The Apostle Paul penned those words, having fought the good fight, right on to the end as he faced imminent execution under Nero's sword. Let us all, brothers and sisters, set our courses to finish well.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Hey everybody, it's Chad with the band Unspoken. I've seen firsthand how powerful it is when the church comes together, and that's exactly what Redeem Health Share is all about. With rising medical costs, Redeem offers a more affordable way to care for your family. Their flexible programs are designed to fit your budget without sacrificing your values. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and the treatments that are right for your family. It's not just about the money, it's about community. Redeem Health Share is rooted in biblical principles. So whether it's a routine visit or sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. This time of the year is a great reminder to make choices that reflect our faith. So if you're looking for another way forward, one that reflects your faith, this is it. Call 844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement, share joyfully, and live redeemed.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, speaking of the redistricting in Florida, that has now gone through the House. It's making its way through the Senate, and it seems like that will be a signature accomplishment of the legislature under the helm, really, of Governor DeSantis. But a couple of other major issues did not get attention in Florida's legislature and are key points as well in the debate over policy, which it seems like Byron Donalds doesn't want to touch, but at least several other candidates are talking about policy in the gubernatorial election. And so James Fishback is one of those candidates. He's also the CEO of Azoria and joins me now. So overall, there's been a lot of talk among Florida voters about property tax relief, the AI data centers, which inexplicably, Byron Donalds seems totally fine with. I'm guessing probably because, some of his donors are big, AI and tech company advocates, and it would benefit them personally. But really, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion about policy and what the actual impact would be to Florida. So that's a big concern, among a few other things, including medical freedom, which the state legislature refused to consider. So where are we at in this governor's race? Because I think a lot of people are finally waking up to the fact that it doesn't seem like Byron Donalds, who we've invited on this program to answer, some of these questions, he doesn't really have a plan. It just seems like he's campaigning on vibes and taking credit for things that Governor DeSantis has already done.
Well, good morning, Jenna. I think you laid it out well there. And to your point, where are we? Where are we in Florida? We are at a fork in the road. I was one of the first people to say this, that I would not be running for governor if Ron DeSantis could run for a third term. I would happily vote for him, as I had in 2018 and 2022. He has met the moment every single step of the way. I think he's the greatest governor in Florida history. But alas, there are term limits in Florida. And so the next governor has to, one, preserve the wins of Ron DeSantis, and two, make headway in areas that DeSantis perhaps wasn't able to do in these short 8 years. Property tax reform is one of them, affordability, cracking down on insurance premium increase, whether it's auto or homeowners. And to your point, Byron Donalds has been missing in action once again. He was, of course, in Pensacola this last week. We've all seen the video now, where he is at a fundraiser at a home that on Zillow is worth $7 million. And the home fundraiser host looks to everyone and says, everyone here in this room, I hope you're investors in his company, Byron's company, because if you're investors, you're shareholders. If you're shareholders, you get to spend time with the CEO, and if you help steer the direction that this great state is on. And so this is the kind of disgusting pay-to-play politics that enraged us about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton for years, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden for years. And I'm sad to say it is engulfing our own party. And Jenna, what I respect about you is that you are willing to call out the excesses and abuses of our party when it is strayed. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah. And, and I think you're absolutely right that, Florida, like many states in this country, and I think America as a whole, is at a crossroads. And really, this election is one that the eyes of the nation are on because of Governor DeSantis's wins, because Florida has been the free state of Florida and the model for the last 8 years. And if this state is turned over to a Republican in name only, or even worse, potentially a Democrat. I mean, I can't even believe that we're at that point, that it's even possible that a Democrat would succeed Governor DeSantis. That will mean that Florida is no longer the beacon of the example for the rest of the country. And that would be really sad. I mean, I moved here because of DeSantis's leadership. I want to continue in that tradition, but it also seems like the legislature is more focused on kind of these petty personal disputes and don't want to give DeSantis too many wins, instead of actually focused on what the voters want. And when you have a supermajority of Republicans in the legislature, that's just really offensive to me.
It is. And a supermajority of Republicans means absolutely nothing if those Republicans, to your point, have taken millions of dollars.
Oh, and it looks we're having so many issues with the phone today. I don't know if it's that something on our end, or if people just don't want to talk this morning. But I can't imagine that, knowing James Fishback and also Mike Donnelly, both of whom love to pontificate. But we'll try to get Fishback back so that we can finish out this last segment. But from my perspective as a Floridian and kind of getting involved more in local politics here, seeing some of those state level petty disputes, it really mirrors the federal government, where you're wondering, why don't members of Congress do anything? Well, it's the same thing here in Florida. Why aren't they doing anything? Because often when you get these people who are more concerned about preserving their own power than they are about actually doing the business of governing, then you have a problem and you have an inconsistency. Because if people who we elect are going into office just because they want that power, they want the benefits that come along with it, and they also are more concerned about preserving that power than they are about actually doing their job, then you have a disconnected non-statesman, and that's how we arrive at career politicians. And I have long been an advocate, especially in primaries where, if we are conservatives, we can choose the best candidate then to represent us. And it's not just about, the endorsements. It really is not just about who Trump endorses. You can take that, of course, how you prefer and maybe factor that into the equation. But the track record of Trump is not great in terms of actually choosing the best conservative. It's more in his vein, who is the most loyal to, the MAGA agenda, whatever that happens to be today. But it's more about, for the voters, and especially as conservatives, we need to be concerned with choosing the best candidate that accurately reflects the policy and understands that in depth, and also has a track record. And here in Florida, that's why I've openly said in my personal capacity, I support Paul Renner, because he is the former Speaker of the House. He understands how to work with the legislature, has a track record of conservative policy, where if you look at the candidate like Byron Donalds, what has he done in Congress? Well, you can look at that record, and we need to look more at the record, at the personal history, the personal record, whether they claim and actually follow to being Christians. That actually is a really big consideration for voting. And we need to be engaged at every step of the way. The fact that there is so much of a lower turnout historically in primaries than there is in the general election is a problem. And we need to know, here in Florida, our primary is August 18th. For everyone listening who's in Florida, get out and vote. Figure out, for whatever state you're listening in, figure out when your primaries are, if there are special elections. Special elections often don't have as much turnout because people aren't even really aware that they're going on. And that's a problem. You shouldn't have to wait to listen, to your local media, or if you get a flyer in the mail, to be aware of what's going on in your state. This is being a responsible, informed citizen, or knowing, for example, if there's a runoff, knowing if there are ballot initiatives. And this doesn't mean that everyone is engaged in politics 24/7. I know that that's impossible, and I know that there are so many other priorities that people have. And that's fine, but just make sure, and the point is, make sure that you are engaged enough that you can be responsible for your duty, that God has given us such a great gift in this nation to be able to participate in our elections, to select and prefer our leaders. There are so many people in other countries that really wish that they had a voice and that they can select and prefer their leaders. That's why all of these redistricting cases, these things like the SAVE Act, the litigation over the census, all of this matters because it goes to the basic concept of representation and the fact that this is a country of the people, by the people, for the people, and that we, the people, actually get to select our leaders in a free and fair process. Now, can the process be manipulated somewhat by those in power, as Mike Donnelly said in the last segment? Yes, and to an extent, that's part of the process and why majorities matter. But that's within the contours and the bounds of not only the federal constitution, but also state law. And we need to be aware of all of that. We need to be engaged in that process, and we need to know how to best utilize our vote and our voice, not just also for candidates and the individuals in office, but also for the issues. Ballot issues are huge initiatives. Here in the state of Florida, I was so thankful that Governor DeSantis was so such a vocal advocate against legislating and the ballot initiatives against recreational abortion and also recreational marijuana. Those two issues failed in Florida because of his leadership, and those were two huge issues that I think a lot of people until DeSantis got involved weren't even aware of. So we need to be responsible citizens. We'll have to have James Fish back on another time. Not sure what happened to his connection there, but appreciate him coming on as always. You can follow him on X, and as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Getting married, starting a family,